Let's talk about functions. So functions are basically pieces or components of logic that we use to carry out our objectives. You can think of this as scripts. You could think of this as, um, basically just logic workflows. There's so many names that we've ascribed to just the term functions. Uh, but basically, the whole idea of functions is that we want to carry out some logic, and we basically program this logic using a function. On the in-house cloud platform, um, we basically have our three core modules, which are web apps, APIs, and automations. And the driver, or the I guess the um, these modules are powered by functions. One of the drawbacks to no code tools today is that the logic runs thin, right? So on this platform, we have the most advanced function builder that is designed to be user friendly to developers, and to be user friendly to new comers as well. All right. So functions can be written in our function in the function builder. I am currently in the in-house cloud console, and I can just go to the function builder by entering the functions tab. Here, I can see the list of, I can see all my functions. I can search, I can sort, and when I find the function I'm looking for, I can basically just click on it, look at the different workflows, and basically dive into the meats and bones. All right. So now, like I said earlier, we use functions in our three core modules. So this just before we get into the function builder, let's just see where we can use these functions. All right, I'm going to dive out. I'm going to dive into the app hub. We're going to take a look at one of the apps. So here I'm just going to look at my this walkthrough app. This is just a demo application. Going to load. All right, so here we have an application. So if I were to, let's just select an element and go over to events, as you can see, we have the events associated with an element. In this case, it's a heading. And we could basically attach functions by simply just writing down the name of the function. And another way we use functions here is in our script user interface. We're going to get into that. Uh, we can use functions in the lifecycle functions. So basically, this is like when the page loads, app close. So basically, there are many ways we use functions to power up applications. Uh, this is what makes the in-house cloud app builder the most powerful app builder in the market, because you can use functions all the way down to even the styling, right? So you can have very dynamic styling. All right, let me just show you one use case here. So we have this table, and this table is pulling data from database. And if I were to just switch over to the table and select the table and go over to the events, I have a table data fetch event that is basically getting the logs that we're displaying here. It's really uh, powerful what you can do when you're working with functions. All right, so let's exit this and let's go to APIs. So when you see APIs, you know, your APIs basically run logic, right? So every single API has to be attached to a function. As you can see here, we have this API that is running the test DB function. And, to select the function or to change the function, all you would need to do is just click on that widget. It will pop up the function builder, and you will select the function that you want to run in an API. The same goes with a scheduled task automation. When you create a task, you get to pick the function that you would like to execute when that task runs. All right. Now let's go back to the function hub. All right. So let's create a new function. We're going to call this function tutorial function. Call it tutorial 2 because I think I already have a tutorial function. I'm just going to say this is to be deleted because it's completely going to be random. All right. So when we create a function, we basically add workflows to our function. So basically, a workflow is a block of logic, right? So in this case, I'm just gonna create a workflow. I'm going to call this logic one. Now within our workflow, we have steps, right? So this is a stepped system. It executes sequentially, right? So within our workflow, we have steps, and then to add a step, all we need to do is click on the add step button, right? And then we can select whichever step, whichever function that we would like to run. We have it all, from basic if else statements to some of the most advanced uh, type of functions. It's all in here. So let's see. I'm just going to use a variable. I'm just going to say that I'm going to set a variable, and I'm just going to say this is initial value. Right. So within the function and around this application, you're going to see an interface that looks just like this. This is what we call the script user interface. All this is just a fancy way of writing logic and expressions. So we're just going to do something really quick. We're just going to say this is going to be a number, and we'll call it 3. That's it. All we've done here is set a variable. It's that simple. If we want to go further, and let's say we wanted to do uh, some computation, and we wanted to do this in a different step, we could do something like this. We could say, all right, this is let's just call this val2, random name, and we could reference our initial value, right, by just typing it. It will give you options. We select that. Now we want to add another expression, another script to our expression. So I'm going to click on this arrow. I'm going to close this out. I'm going to say plus. I'm going to add another one. I'm going to change this to a number. You have it. I just did some basic arithmetic. Let's say I wanted to, do something, I guess, more advanced. I could click on it. I could go one step behind, open parentheses, perhaps add another step, close parentheses. But now maybe I want to raise this to the power 2. So what would I do? I go back to my close parentheses and add an expression method. So basically, an expression method is exactly what it is. These are just functional methods that basically apply to an existing value. These functions are system functions that you can use along with your scripts to run any kind of logic. All right. So in this case, we want to raise to the power 2. One way to do it is you can scroll or you can search. Here, we're just going to search for power. Okay. And we are going to change the value to 2. All right. So that's it. we basically have a some logic that basically takes an initial value, and we would like to add it by 10 and raise to the power 2. But so far, basically, what we've done here is something very simple. This is not the type of functions that 99.9 of us are gonna, percent of us are gonna be writing. We're gonna be consuming these applications from web apps. We're gonna be consuming these applications from APIs. So now we're gonna send our attention to parameters. So basically, function parameters are basically things that we pass into the function to consume within the function. Now, for ease, there are system generated parameters. These parameters are basically provided by the system uh, to ensure, just to make things a little easier. There are two types of parameters. There are parameters that exist on the client only, meaning that these parameters only exist in web applications or web based software. And then there are API only um, parameters. These parameters, these system generated parameters, are only available on server side functions or functions that trigger on the server side. This will include your APIs, this will include your automations. Okay, so let's just go from top to bottom. App data. So this is basically the live or the current app data of your application. That's basically what this is. Events. If this function is triggered from an event, like an on click event, on scroll, whatever the case may be, you would have that event object available to you in list. If a function is triggered from a list, let's say a table or like a list, this will be true, else it's going to be false. The list item data. Again, if this function is triggered from a list, let's say, it's an on click event or a submission event, or whatever event from a table row or from a list item, that row data is going to be reflected here, along with the list item index, which would be your row index or your list index. If there is a logged in user, we will provide that user's data in the user parameter. And this applies for this is a client and API parameter. User agents. So basically, this is just some metadata about a user's connection. So this is also available on the client and in server-side functions. Route parameters. So basically, these are basically just your route parameters. Um, so whenever you configure your pages, you're going to have slugs, you're going to have all these bits, and you have this data available within uh, your apps, your web apps, and within your APIs. So a good example would be if you were to have query strings on the page, you could basically just use that to maybe run certain queries or set certain state. All depends on how you want to implement this. Request. I think I might have mixed up this too. I'm sorry. But route parameters are basically route parameters, and query string parameters are query string parameters. These are, you know, um, you know, used, for the predominantly to query sites. Request headers. This is basically just the request header of an API call, you know, and the request body. If this is if this is executing in an API, then this will be available. Okay. Now you can also add your own parameters. And when you add your parameters, whenever you try to invoke this function, those parameters will be requested. Okay. So let's add a parameter. We'll call this random parameter. We're going to call it random param. This is a random parameter. Cannot spell today. It's going to be by default an empty string. Okay. If I were to save this, if I were to add another step, okay, and let's say in this step, I was trying to execute this exact function because you can do recursion here. And let's say I wanted to execute an external function, and I select my tutorial. Oh, I think, well, yeah, I can just do it this way. Let's see, tutorial 2. That's what I thought. Let's see. Let's deploy this. All right. And let's add that step back. And let's see, execute external function. And we select tutorial. It gives me the option to basically enter in the parameters. So all the system generated parameters will be passed into the function, and it will also give me the opportunity or the option to pass in uh, my defined custom parameters. And in this case, everything is within scope. I could basically just say app data, whatever, you know. So let's close this out. So how would we consume parameters within like a regular function flow? It's pretty straightforward. Let's say I wanted to add another step and set a variable, and I say, okay, I want to call this random text from our random parameter. Right. So now to reference variables and to reference parameters in our script user interface, we have to be in text mode. All you have to do is just begin to type that parameter. So in this case, that's random. As you can see, it's referencing the variable random, but I can also see the parameter random param, and that's it. This parameter has been selected. I can do whatever I want. I can say random param plus random text. And in this case, I did not select anything from the dropdown, so it's just a string. All right. So now we've gone over parameters. You've seen variables that have been set. You see how we reference variables. You see how we reference parameters. You've seen us invoke a parameter in a function. This kind of gives you an idea of how these parameters, how these functions will be consumed outside of the function builder. We've basically written a very, very simple arithmetic type logic. So let's go back to the script user interface. So far, all we know about this is that this is just a way to write some logic. We've gone through numbers, pretty straightforward. Text used to reference functions or used to reference parameters and variables, or you can use it to basically just type in strings. Objects basically used to write an object. So if you wanted to, let's say, write a random object, so let's say on first name, we have it. I have an object. And of course, just like everything else, I can basically add a method to stringify. Now this is a string that can be uh, concatenated with another string. So the script user interface is a very powerful tool to write some really complex logic of any type. You can reference variables from within. You can reference parameters from within. So if I were to reference, let's say, val2, my variable over here, I could basically just start typing val. And I can just select from the options, and that's that. I have my first name key, which I spelled wrong, mapped to whatever this variable returns or resolves to. So let's take a look at one other option. If I were to just remove this, we have the function. So you can reference functions inline, or you could reference functions as standalones. All right. So here we have, let's just reference our tutorial to function. Just like we did when we did it on as a standalone, you could also provide the parameter for this function. So as you can see, this is going to be random, whatever this random is, plus whatever this resolves to. So the script user interface, you will see this, around the application in a lot of places. This is basically just how we build no-code logic on the Inhouz Cloud function builder, right? So far we have one workflow. You only need, if you want to have multiple workflows, maybe you want to segment your code, you can do that, uh, you can do that easily. If you just want to have one workflow, you can just, add another step. And if you maybe you wanted to return some data, you can just return that data, right? But in this case, let's say we wanted to have multiple workflows. So if I were to go back to my workflows, and basically if I were to close this out and say logic 2, now I have two workflows, logic 1 and logic 2. Now, if I wanted to mix and match, I could just drag and drop and basically change the sequential order. I can basically add steps to my logic 2. If I go back to logic 1, these are still here. Let's say I wanted to rearrange the order of some of these functions. I can basically just click on this button to enable drag and drop, and I can move around some of my logic. You know, so let's say I wanted to add something between val2 and random text. I could easily just add a step, get to drag and drop mode, and move that to the intended position, exit drag drop mode, and get to work. All right. Now we've gone through, this is a lot. This is one very big video. Um, but I just wanted to give an idea of how we write logic. There are no limits to what you can write. You could write some really complex logic, all the way from basic, functions to some really advanced functions, like converting like data transformations, array buffers to base 64, um, you know, if else statements, for loops, JSON to XML. I mean, so many complex, so many fun options, even database operations, right? Let's just take a look at what that looks like, for like a SQL query. I guess we call this X, select all from products. So you can see how, how fun and how powerful this is. We just write in logic, you know, with no regard, and we can mix and match this logic. We can reuse, we could write recursive functions, we can pass in parameters, we have system generated parameters, we can monitor our variables. Um, in Very soon, we'll be able to write tests, uh, you know, uh, but we don't have that just yet. Um, and finally, controls. So when you have your function, you can decide if you want to be the only one to be able to perhaps see this function. Or if you want to restrict access to this function, you can. If you want to revert to a different version, so right now I'm in version 2. If I were to save this, now I'm in version 3, where I have version 2 deployed. I could, deploy my active version, which is version 3, to production. And I just do that right here. And there you have it. I'm in version 3, and I have version 3 deployed as well. So now wherever this function is referenced, um, we will have that update. All right. So this is just a really really wide video of the function builder. We will dive in little bits and pieces in a future video. Uh, so this is just to give an idea, an early introduction into how we write logic on the platform. This is not necessarily meant to teach you everything you need to know. We're going to go into the minutia in future videos. We're going to write simple functions. We're going to use those functions in applications. We're going to use those functions in APIs, and we're going to really learn how it works. All right. I'll see you in the next video.